The medical bay's sterile white walls felt like a prison after 3 years of commanding starships across hostile sectors. Admiral Sarah Chen, barely 21 years old, stared at her reflection in the polished metal surface of her bedside table. The face looking back carried scars that had no business being on someone who should still be worrying about college exams. "The neural implants are functioning perfectly," Dr. Martinez said, checking his tablet for the 100th time that morning. "Your tactical processing speed, strategic analysis capabilities, all enhanced cognitive functions are operating at peak efficiency." Sarah nodded absently, her fingers tracing the barely visible scars along her temples where the military-grade implants had been installed when she was 17. Back then, Earth was losing the war against the Zephyrian Empire, and desperate times called for desperate measures. The High Command had identified her as one of the few humans capable of handling the cognitive load required to coordinate multi-fleet operations across vast distances of space. "That's not what I'm worried about, Doc," she said quietly. "It's everything else." The everything else was substantial. 3 years ago, Sarah had been a normal teenager attending high school in New Denver. She worried about math tests, had crushes on classmates, and spent weekends playing video games with friends. Then the aptitude tests came back, and within 6 months she found herself commanding humanity's largest battle fleet against an alien empire that had conquered half the galaxy. The war was over now. Humanity had won, largely thanks to tactical innovations that only enhanced human minds could conceive and execute. The Zephyrians had sued for peace after the Battle of Kepler 442, where Sarah's unconventional strategy had destroyed their primary war fleet while suffering minimal casualties. She was a hero, a legend, the youngest admiral in human history. She was also completely lost. The integration process back into civilian life can be challenging, Dr. Martinez continued, his voice taking on the practiced tone of someone who had given this speech many times before. "You're not the first enhanced veteran to struggle with the transition. The military modifications to your brain chemistry, while necessary for command effectiveness, can make normal social interactions feel boring," Sarah finished. "Everything feels boring. I used to coordinate the movements of 300 ships and 40,000 personnel. Yesterday I spent 20 minutes trying to decide what to have for breakfast." The doctor made a note on his tablet. "Have you considered remaining in the military? The Space Force would be honored to have you continue serving. There are exploration missions, diplomatic roles." Sarah shook her head. "I joined the military because humanity needed saving. We're safe now. I want to try being normal again." But even as she said it, she wondered if normal was possible. The implants had changed more than just her cognitive abilities. They had altered her perception of time, her emotional responses, her basic social programming. She could calculate the optimal trajectory for a spacecraft moving at near light speed. But she couldn't figure out how to talk to people her own age without analyzing their psychological profiles and predicting their behavioral patterns. The rehabilitation center on Luna Station was supposed to help veterans like her readjust. It was a beautiful facility, with artificial gravity, simulated Earth weather, and counselors trained in post-enhancement psychology. Sarah had been there for 2 weeks and she was already climbing the walls. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," Dr. Martinez said, pulling up a file on his tablet. "Another enhanced veteran about your age. Marcus Webb. He was a tactical specialist during the Proxima campaign." Sarah remembered the Proxima campaign. It had been one of her operations, a complex multi-phase assault that had broken the Zephyrian defensive line in the outer colonies. She wondered if this Marcus had been one of the tactical analysts feeding her real-time data during the battle. "He's been here for 6 months, the doctor continued. "He's made significant progress in his civilian integration. I think you two might have a lot to talk about." The rec room where they met felt like a bizarre parody of a normal social space. Everything was designed to look casual and comfortable, but Sarah could see the monitoring systems hidden in the walls, the carefully planned layout designed to encourage specific types of interaction. Her enhanced pattern recognition made it impossible to ignore. Marcus was sitting by the window, looking out at the lunar surface. He was tall, lean, with the kind of precise posture that marked him as military even in civilian clothes. When he turned to greet her, Sarah saw the familiar look in his eyes, the slightly unfocused gaze of someone whose mind was processing information at superhuman speeds. "Admiral Chen," he said, standing and offering a respectful nod. I've read about your tactics at Kepler 442. Brilliant work. Just Sarah now, she replied. And thank you. Though I'm not sure brilliant is the right word for sending thousands of people into battle. Marcus smiled. And for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt like she was talking to someone who might actually understand. That's the thing they don't tell you about the enhancements, he said. They make you incredibly good at war, but they don't prepare you for peace. They spent the next 2 hours talking, and Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time since the war ended. Marcus understood the strange isolation of enhanced intelligence, the way normal conversations felt like they were happening in slow motion, the difficulty of connecting with people who couldn't comprehend the weight of the decisions they had made. The worst part, Marcus said as they walked through the station's garden dome, is that part of me misses it. The clarity, the purpose, the sense that everything I did mattered on a cosmic scale. Sarah nodded. I used to save planets before lunch. Now I'm supposed to get excited about choosing a career path. Have you thought about what you want to do? Marcus asked. Sarah stopped walking and looked up at the artificial sky. Somewhere beyond the dome's projection, Earth hung in space, blue and peaceful and utterly ordinary. I want to go home, she said. I want to see if I can remember how to be the person I was before all this started. But even as she said it, she wondered if that person still existed, or if the war had burned her away completely, leaving only the Admiral behind. Earth felt alien after 3 years in space. Sarah stood in the arrival terminal at Colorado Spaceport, watching ordinary people go about their ordinary lives. Children ran past her, laughing and playing while their parents chatted about mundane things like weather and grocery shopping. The normalcy was overwhelming. Her parents were waiting for her beyond the security checkpoint. David and Ellen Chen looked older than she remembered, though only 3 years had passed. The war had aged everyone, she supposed, even those who stayed safely on Earth. Her mother's hair had gone completely gray, and her father's face carried new lines of worry. Sarah, her mother whispered, pulling her into a fierce hug. My baby girl. Sarah stiffened slightly at the contact. Physical affection had been rare during her military service, limited to formal ceremonies and brief congratulations after victories. The emotional intensity of her mother's embrace felt strange and foreign, though she tried to return it appropriately. You look so different, her father said, studying her face with concern. Older, Sarah caught her reflection in a nearby window. He was right. The teenager who had left Earth was gone, replaced by someone who carried herself with military precision and watched everything with calculating eyes. Even in civilian clothes, she looked like she was preparing for battle. The ride home to New Denver was awkward. Her parents tried to fill the silence with updates about neighbors, family, friends, and local events, but Sarah found it difficult to engage. Her enhanced mind kept analyzing traffic patterns, identifying potential security threats, and calculating optimal routes, even though there was no danger. The habits of command were hard to break. Your room is exactly as you left it, her mother said as they pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home. I know you're not a teenager anymore, but I thought you might want some familiarity. The house looked smaller than Sarah remembered. Everything seemed diminished somehow, as if she had grown too large for the spaces that once contained her life. Her childhood bedroom felt like a museum exhibit dedicated to someone else's past. Her old posters were still on the walls, boy bands and movie stars who seemed impossibly young and trivial now. Her desk still held textbooks for classes she would never finish, homework assignments that would never matter. On her dresser, a photo showed her with her best friend Amy at last year's spring formal, both of them grinning and carefree. Amy had been killed in the Zephyrian attack on Luna City, along with 3,000 other civilians. Sarah had ordered the retaliatory strike that leveled the enemy staging area. The mathematics of war made it a clean exchange. 3,000 human lives for 12,000 alien ones, and a strategic victory that shortened the conflict by months. But looking at Amy's frozen smile, the calculations felt cold and hollow. Dinner's in an hour, her mother called from downstairs. I made your favorite, lasagna. Sarah sat on her childhood bed and tried to remember what it felt like to be excited about lasagna. The enhanced metabolism that came with her implants meant she needed more protein and fewer carbohydrates than normal humans. She could eat the meal, but it would make her sluggish and uncomfortable. Another small reminder that she no longer quite fit in the world she had fought to save. The dinner conversation was stilted. Her parents asked careful questions about her service, avoiding anything too specific about combat or casualties. Sarah tried to share sanitized versions of her experiences, but even the mild stories seemed to upset them. How could she explain the weight of holding humanity's survival in her hands, without sounding like she was bragging or traumatizing them further? "We're so proud of you," her father said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "Our daughter, the hero who saved the world." Sarah pulled her hand away gently. "I didn't do it alone, Dad. There were millions of people involved. But you were the one making the decisions," her mother added. "The news report said you were the youngest admiral in history, that your strategies won the war." The hero worship made Sarah uncomfortable. Yes, she had made critical decisions that helped end the conflict, but she had also made mistakes that cost lives. She remembered every casualty report, every ship that didn't come home, every tactical error that led to unnecessary deaths. The enhancement implants made it impossible to forget anything, including her failures. After dinner, she excused herself and went for a walk through her old neighborhood. The streets were quiet in the early evening, with families settling in for the night. Through windows, she could see people watching entertainment programs, helping children with homework, and living the peaceful lives she had fought to preserve. But instead of satisfaction, she felt only emptiness. These people were safe because of her sacrifices, yet she felt no connection to them. Their concerns seemed trivial, their problems insignificant. She had defended their way of life while becoming unable to participate in it. Her enhanced hearing picked up conversations from inside houses, complaints about work, excitement over sports teams, plans for weekend activities. All of it felt like background noise, the chatter of a species she no longer quite belonged to. She found herself at the local park where she used to play as a child. The playground equipment looked worn and faded, smaller than she remembered. She sat on a bench and watched the empty swings move slightly in the evening breeze. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus back at the rehabilitation center. "How's the homecoming going?" he had written. "Like being a ghost visiting my own life," she typed back. "It gets easier," came his quick reply. Or at least it gets different. Sarah wasn't sure if different was enough. She had hoped that coming home would help her remember who she used to be. But instead, it was highlighting how completely that person had been erased. The girl who had grown up in this house, played in this park, and worried about high school social dynamics was gone, replaced by someone shaped by war and responsibility. As darkness fell, she walked back to the house where her parents were watching the news. The anchor was discussing post-war reconstruction efforts and the upcoming celebration of Victory Day. Sarah's official portrait appeared on screen as they mentioned her role in the conflict. "That's our daughter," her mother said proudly to no one in particular. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching her parents beam with pride at the image of the young admiral on screen. But looking at that official photo, she realized with growing certainty that the person they were proud of and the person standing in their doorway were not the same. The war had created Admiral Chen at the cost of Sarah Chen, and she was beginning to understand that some transformations could not be undone. The question now was whether she could build something new from what remained, or if she was doomed to be forever caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. 3 weeks after returning home, Sarah found herself standing in the guidance counselor's office at New Denver Community College, staring at a wall covered with cheerful posters about career opportunities and student life. The counselor, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Patterson, was enthusiastically explaining degree programs while Sarah's enhanced mind calculated the statistical probability of each career path, providing meaningful fulfillment. "Given your unique background," Mrs. Patterson said, consulting Sarah's file with obvious excitement, "I think you'd be perfect for our new military history program, or perhaps international relations. Your experience would give you incredible insights that other students simply couldn't match." Sarah nodded politely while internally analyzing the woman's body language and speech patterns. Mrs. Patterson was nervous. Her elevated heart rate was audible to Sarah's enhanced hearing, and her slight hand tremor suggested she was starstruck by having a war hero in her office. The dynamic made genuine conversation impossible. "I was actually thinking about something completely different," Sarah said carefully. "Maybe art therapy or elementary education, something that doesn't involve strategy or conflict." The counselor's face showed poorly concealed disappointment. Of course, if that's what you prefer. Though it seems like such a waste of your talents. This was the problem Sarah encountered everywhere. People couldn't see past her military achievements to understand that she desperately wanted to be more than the sum of her wartime decisions. Every conversation became about her service. Every suggestion built on her reputation as a tactical genius. No one seemed to consider that she might want to nurture instead of destroy, create instead of coordinate destruction. After the meeting, Sarah walked across the campus quad, observing the students her age. They moved with an easy confidence she envied, worrying about things like exam schedules and social plans. A group near the fountain was debating which movie to see that weekend, their biggest concern apparently whether the theater would be too crowded. Sarah found their problems refreshingly trivial. She wanted to join their conversation, to care about movie times and popcorn preferences, but when she approached, they recognized her from news coverage, and the dynamic shifted immediately. "Oh, my God, you're Admiral Chen," one girl whispered to her friends loud enough for Sarah's enhanced hearing to pick up clearly, "the one who won the war." "She's so young," another added. "I can't believe someone our age was commanding space fleets." The group fell silent as Sarah drew near, their casual chatter replaced by awkward reverence. They stared at her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, like they weren't sure whether to salute or ask for autographs. "Hi," Sarah said simply, trying to project normalcy. "I heard you talking about movies. What were you planning to see?" The attempt at normal conversation felt forced. The students answered her questions politely but stiffly, and she could see them exchanging glances when they thought she wasn't looking. Her enhanced peripheral vision made it impossible to miss their discomfort. After a few minutes of painful small talk, Sarah excused herself and found a quiet spot under a tree. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus, who had become her primary connection to anyone who understood her situation. "How's the college experience?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "About as successful as my attempt to order coffee this morning," Sarah replied. "The barista kept calling me ma'am and asking if I needed extra security. I just wanted a latte." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I tried to go to a party last weekend. Civilian party, just normal people having fun. Spent the whole time analyzing the crowd dynamics and identifying potential security risks. When someone spilled a drink, I instinctively started calculating evacuation routes. Do you think we're broken?" Sarah asked quietly. "Not broken," Marcus said after a pause. "Different. The question is whether different can learn to fit in the world we saved." That evening, Sarah attempted to reconnect with old friends. She met her former classmate Jenny at a local restaurant, hoping that someone from her pre-war life might help her remember who she used to be. Jenny had changed too, but in normal ways. She was studying business, dating a guy from her economics class, and excited about an internship at a marketing firm. Her problems were relatable and human scale. Difficult professors, relationship drama, concerns about student loans. "I still can't believe what happened to you," Jenny said over dinner. "When you left for the military, we all thought you'd be back in a year or two. Then suddenly you're on the news every night leading battles against aliens. It's like you became a completely different person." "Sometimes I feel like I did," Sarah admitted. "But it must be amazing," Jenny continued, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Having that kind of power, that responsibility, making decisions that affect the entire human race. Don't you miss it?" Sarah considered the question honestly. Part of her did miss the clarity of command, the sense that every action had cosmic significance, but she also remembered the crushing weight of knowing that her mistakes could doom billions of people, the sleepless nights calculating acceptable casualty rates, the gradual erosion of her ability to see individual humans as anything more than strategic assets. "I miss the purpose," she said finally, "but I don't miss the cost." Jenny looked confused, clearly unable to understand what cost Sarah was referring to. To her, the war had been something that happened on screens, a distant conflict that ended in glorious victory. She couldn't comprehend the psychological toll of actually fighting it. The conversation drifted to safer topics: mutual friends, local events, memories of high school. But even the nostalgia felt hollow to Sarah. The person those memories belonged to felt like a stranger, someone she had known briefly long ago. Walking home after dinner, Sarah's enhanced vision caught movement in an alley between buildings. Her tactical assessment kicked in automatically. 3 figures, aggressive postures, potential weapons. Her body tensed for combat before she realized they were just teenagers hanging out, probably smoking something they shouldn't. The false alarm was telling. Her nervous system was still calibrated for war, interpreting normal civilian life through the lens of potential threats. She wondered if this hypervigilance would ever fade, or if she was doomed to see danger in every shadow. At home, her parents were watching a documentary about the war. Sarah paused in the doorway, listening to the narrator describe the tactical brilliance of the Kepler 442 campaign. The program made it sound clean and heroic, a masterpiece of strategic thinking that saved humanity through superior planning and execution. The reality had been messier. Sarah remembered the young communications officer who had died when a Zephyrian kamikaze ship broke through their defensive screen. She remembered the supply convoy that was 2 hours late, forcing her to revise battle plans while under fire. She remembered the moment when she realized they were going to win, and feeling not triumph but overwhelming relief that the killing could finally stop. "There's our hero," her father said, noticing her in the doorway. "Come watch this with us. They're talking about your greatest victory." Sarah shook her head gently. "I think I'll head to bed early. Long day." Upstairs in her room, she stood before the mirror again, studying the face that had commanded respect from veteran officers twice her age. She wondered if that person could ever learn to be excited about movie nights and coffee dates, or if the gulf between who she had become and who she wanted to be was simply too wide to bridge. Tomorrow she would try again. Another day of attempting to fit her enhanced mind into ordinary human social structures. But tonight, she allowed herself to grieve for the normal life she had given up, and to wonder if the person she was trying to become was just another impossible tactical objective. The breakthrough came in the most unexpected place, a volunteer position at the local children's hospital. Sarah had taken the job partially on Dr. Martinez's recommendation and partially out of desperation. Nothing else she had tried felt meaningful enough to hold her interest for more than a few days. Children, it turned out, didn't care about her military record. To 6-year-old Emma Rodriguez, who was recovering from surgery to repair a heart defect, Sarah was simply the lady who read stories and helped with puzzles. Emma had never heard of the Battle of Kepler 442 and wouldn't have cared if she had. "Can you read the one about the space princess again?" Emma asked, settling into her hospital bed with a stuffed dragon clutched tightly in her arms. Sarah opened the picture book and began reading, but Emma interrupted almost immediately. "No, not like that," the little girl said with the absolute authority that only children possess. "You have to do the voices. The princess sounds different from the space pirates." Sarah found herself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in weeks. "You're right. Let me try again." As she read with animated voices and exaggerated expressions, Sarah's enhanced mind was still working, but differently. Instead of calculating battle strategies, she was analyzing Emma's emotional responses, adjusting her performance to maximize the child's engagement and joy. The same cognitive abilities that had won a war were now being used to make a sick little girl laugh. "You're really good at this," said Maria Santos, the head of the pediatric ward, who had been watching from the doorway. "Emma's been asking for you specifically every day this week." Maria was different from most of the adults Sarah encountered. She was completely unfazed by Sarah's reputation, treating her like any other volunteer. Perhaps working with life and death situations every day made her immune to celebrity worship. "The kids respond to authenticity," Maria continued as they walked through the hospital corridors. "They can tell when someone genuinely cares versus when someone is just going through the motions. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Sarah began spending more time at the hospital, working with children across different age groups. The teenagers were harder. They knew who she was and were either overly impressed or deliberately unimpressed. But the younger children treated her like any other adult, expecting nothing more than kindness and attention. 8-year-old Marcus Thompson was undergoing treatment for leukemia. He was fascinated by space and peppered Sarah with questions about what it was really like to travel between stars. Unlike adults who focused on the military aspects of her service, Marcus wanted to know about the everyday details. "Did you ever see any cool planets?" he asked during one of their sessions in the hospital's playroom. "I saw a planet with purple oceans," Sarah told him, "and another one where it snowed upward because the gravity was different." Marcus's eyes widened. "Really? What else?" Sarah found herself sharing stories she had never told anyone else, moments of wonder and beauty that had been overshadowed by the war's brutality. She talked about the binary star system where sunset came in 2 different colors, the asteroid field that looked like a cosmic garden, the alien music that had drifted through space from an unknown source. "That sounds amazing," Marcus said. "I want to go to space someday, too." "I think you'd make an excellent explorer," Sarah replied, and meant it. These conversations began to shift something in Sarah's understanding of her experiences. She had been so focused on the trauma and responsibility of command that she had forgotten the moments of genuine wonder. Sharing them with children who saw only adventure and possibility helped her reclaim parts of her journey that weren't defined by loss and difficult decisions. Dr. Martinez noticed the change during their weekly check-ins. "Your stress indicators are improving," he observed, reviewing her latest medical scans. "The hospital work seems to be helping." "It's the first thing that's felt meaningful since I came back," Sarah admitted. "These kids don't need me to be a war hero. They just need me to show up and care about them." "That's not as simple as it sounds," Dr. Martinez said. "Many enhanced veterans struggle with activities that don't utilize their full cognitive capabilities. The fact that you're finding fulfillment in basic human connection suggests significant progress." The progress wasn't always smooth. Sarah still had moments where her enhanced reflexes kicked in inappropriately, like the time she instinctively moved to shield a child from a falling toy, with the same tactical precision she had once used to protect starships from enemy fire. The other volunteers noticed her sometimes calculating optimal room layouts or analyzing potential emergency evacuation procedures. But slowly, she began to find a rhythm. Her enhanced abilities didn't disappear, but she learned to channel them into understanding each child's unique needs, remembering complex medical schedules, and coordinating activities that would bring joy to young patients facing serious illnesses. The real test came when Emma's condition took a turn for the worse. Sarah arrived at the hospital one morning to find the little girl's room in crisis mode, filled with medical equipment and worried doctors. Emma's heart was struggling, and she needed emergency surgery with uncertain outcomes. Sarah's first instinct was to take charge, to start issuing orders and organizing responses. But this wasn't a battlefield, and her role here wasn't to command. Instead, she found herself sitting quietly beside Emma's bed, holding the little girl's hand while doctors worked around them. "I'm scared," Emma whispered. "I know," Sarah said softly. "Being scared is okay. But you're the bravest space princess I know, and you have a whole crew of doctors who are going to take really good care of you." "Will you be here when I wake up?" Emma asked. "I'll be right here," Sarah promised. Waiting during Emma's surgery was harder than anything Sarah had faced in combat. In war, she could at least influence outcomes through her decisions and actions. Now she could only wait and hope, trusting in other people's expertise while feeling completely powerless. When the surgery was successful and Emma opened her eyes 12 hours later, Sarah realized something had fundamentally changed. The relief and joy she felt weren't dampened by tactical analysis or strategic thinking. They were pure, uncomplicated emotions that reminded her of who she had been before the war. "You stayed," Emma said weakly, still groggy from anesthesia. "I promised I would," Sarah replied. That night, Sarah called Marcus at the rehabilitation center. "I think I figured something out," she said. "What's that?" "I keep trying to go back to who I was before, but that person doesn't exist anymore. The war changed me permanently. But maybe that doesn't have to be a bad thing." "What do you mean?" Sarah looked out her window toward the hospital, where children were sleeping safely under the care of dedicated medical staff. "Maybe the point isn't to become normal again. Maybe it's to find a way to use what I've become for something good, something that has nothing to do with war. And you think working with sick kids, is that something? I think it's a start, Sarah said. For the first time since I came back, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The conversation ended, but Sarah sat by her window for a long time, thinking about Emma's trust, Marcus Thompson's dreams of space exploration, and all the other children who had accepted her without condition. They had given her something she hadn't found anywhere else, a way to be useful without being destructive, to lead without commanding, to protect without fighting. Maybe normalcy was overrated anyway. 6 months after starting at the hospital, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. She was in the middle of helping 10-year-old David Park build a complex robot from educational blocks when Maria Santos appeared in the playroom doorway with a tall man in an expensive suit. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you," Maria said, her expression carefully neutral. The man introduced himself as Director James Morrison from the Department of Enhanced Veteran Affairs. His smile was professional and slightly condescending, the kind Sarah remembered from military bureaucrats who had never seen actual combat. "Admiral Chen, it's an honor to meet you," Morrison said, extending his hand. "I've been following your progress since your discharge. Very impressive work you're doing here." Sarah accepted the handshake but didn't return the smile. "It's just Sarah now, and this isn't work. It's where I want to be." Of course, Morrison said, glancing around the playroom with barely concealed bewilderment. "Though I have to say it seems like a tremendous waste of your capabilities. We have some opportunities I'd like to discuss with you." Sarah looked at David, who was watching the conversation with the sharp intelligence that serious illness often brought to young minds. "Can this wait? David and I are in the middle of something important." Morrison's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sure the children will understand. This is about your future, Admiral." "Sarah," David said quietly, "if you need to go, it's okay. But can you help me finish the robot's arm first? I can't figure out the joint mechanism." Sarah turned her back on Morrison and knelt beside David's construction. Her enhanced spatial reasoning immediately identified the problem. He was trying to create a ball joint with pieces designed for a hinge mechanism. She guided him through a solution that would work with the available components. "There," she said, as the robot's arm moved smoothly. "You did that perfectly." David beamed with pride. "Thanks. Can you help me with the legs tomorrow?" "I'll be here," Sarah promised. Morrison had waited with obvious impatience, checking his watch repeatedly. When Sarah finally turned her attention back to him, his professional smile had become strained. "Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private," he suggested. They moved to Maria's office, where Morrison spread out a tablet filled with official documents and presentations. "The government has been developing new programs for enhanced veterans," he began. "Consultation work, strategic planning, diplomatic advisory positions. Your unique combination of youth, experience, and cognitive enhancement makes you invaluable for future policy development." Sarah skimmed through the materials. The positions were impressive, well compensated, and exactly the kind of roles that would utilize her enhanced capabilities to their fullest extent. They were also completely focused on conflict, strategy, and the projection of power. "We're particularly interested in your insights for the Enhanced Human Integration Protocol," Morrison continued. "How to better prepare enhanced individuals for post-conflict civilian life. Who better to design those programs than someone who's living through the transition herself? And what makes you think I'm qualified to design programs for other people when I'm still figuring out my own life?" Sarah asked. Morrison looked genuinely confused by the question. "Admiral, you're one of the most successful enhanced veterans in the program. Your tactical innovations saved humanity. Your psychological profiles show remarkable stability and adaptation." "My psychological profiles," Sarah repeated slowly. "Have you actually talked to any enhanced veterans about what this transition is really like? Or are you just looking at data points and assuming everything is fine?" "We have extensive research data from the rehabilitation centers," Morrison said defensively. "The integration success rates are quite promising." Sarah thought about Marcus still struggling with civilian life after 8 months in rehabilitation. She thought about the other enhanced veterans she had met, many of whom were choosing to remain in military or quasi-military roles because civilian life felt impossible to navigate. "Your research is missing something important," Sarah said. "We're not broken machines that need to be reprogrammed for civilian use. We're people who had our basic humanity altered to fight a war, and now we're trying to figure out who we are when that war is over." Morrison made notes on his tablet. "That's exactly the kind of insight we need for the program development. You could help design better integration protocols, more effective therapeutic interventions. Or," Sarah said, "I could continue working with children who don't care about my enhancement status and are teaching me that there are ways to be useful that don't involve optimizing other people's lives." The director looked around Maria's office with its cheerful decorations and photos of young patients. "Surely you don't intend to make a career out of volunteer work. Someone with your capabilities could influence policy for thousands of enhanced veterans, help shape the future of human enhancement technology." "And there it is," Sarah said quietly. "You're not here because you care about my well-being or my personal growth. You want to use my reputation and my enhancement status to legitimize whatever programs you're developing." Morrison's professional mask slipped slightly. "The department needs credible voices for public outreach. Your story is inspiring. Young hero returns from war and successfully integrates into civilian life. It's exactly the narrative we need to maintain public support for enhancement programs." Sarah stood up abruptly. "My story isn't finished yet, and it definitely isn't your marketing material. I'm not successfully integrated. I'm barely figuring out how to have a normal conversation with people my own age. I'm not a poster child. For your programs, I'm a person trying to build a life that makes sense. Think about what you're turning down," Morrison said, his tone becoming more urgent. "These positions come with significant compensation, full medical support, housing allowances. You could have financial security for the rest of your life. In exchange for never being allowed to stop being Admiral Chen," Sarah replied. "For spending the rest of my life defined by the worst years of my existence." Morrison gathered his materials with obvious frustration. "I hope you'll reconsider. The offer will remain open, but these opportunities won't wait indefinitely." After he left, Sarah sat alone in Maria's office, thinking about the path not taken. The positions Morrison had offered were prestigious and important. They would have provided financial security and the sense of working on problems that mattered on a large scale, but they would also have locked her forever into the role of the enhanced veteran, the war hero who couldn't move beyond her military identity. Every day would have been about her enhancement status, her tactical experience, her value as a symbol rather than as a person. Maria knocked on the door and entered with 2 cups of coffee. "Difficult conversation?" she asked, settling into the chair across from Sarah. "Someone trying to convince me that I should spend the rest of my life being professionally exceptional, instead of learning how to be normally human," Sarah said. "What did you tell them?" Sarah smiled, thinking about David's robot and Emma's recovery and all the small moments of genuine connection she had found in this place. "I told them I already have a job." "Good," Maria said simply. "The kids would have been heartbroken if you left, and honestly, so would I." That afternoon, Sarah returned to the playroom where David was working on his robot's legs, struggling with the same kind of mechanical problem she had helped him solve earlier. But instead of immediately offering assistance, she watched him work through the challenge himself, only providing guidance when he asked for it. Her enhanced mind was still analyzing the engineering problems and calculating optimal solutions, but she was learning to let others find their own paths to success. It was a different kind of strategy than anything she had used in military service. The strategy of stepping back instead of taking control, of teaching instead of commanding. When David finally got the robot walking on its own, his excitement was infectious. "Look, Sarah, it works." "You figured it out," she said. "I knew you could." As she walked home that evening, Sarah realized that Morrison's visit had clarified something important. She didn't want to spend her life being exceptional in the way that others expected. She wanted to learn how to be exceptional in ways that mattered to her, as a friend, a mentor, a person who could help others without needing to control outcomes. The enhanced cognitive abilities would always be part of her, but they didn't have to define her purpose. Maybe the most radical thing she could do with her extraordinary capabilities was use them in service of ordinary human kindness. It wasn't the future anyone had planned for her, but it was beginning to feel like the future she actually wanted. A year after returning to Earth, Sarah faced her first real crisis since leaving the military. It started with a simple phone call from Marcus at the rehabilitation center, but his voice carried an edge of panic that immediately put her enhanced threat assessment systems on high alert. "Sarah, I need help," he said without preamble. "There's been an incident." Within an hour, Sarah was on a transport back to Luna Station. Marcus met her at the docking bay, looking haggard and worn in a way that went beyond simple fatigue. His usual precise military bearing had been replaced by something approaching desperation. "3 enhanced veterans attempted suicide last week," he said as they walked through the station corridors. 2 succeeded. The 3rd is in critical condition. Sarah felt her blood go cold. She knew all 3 names, tactical specialists she had worked with during the war, brilliant minds who had helped coordinate some of humanity's most crucial victories. "What happened?" "Integration failure," Marcus said bitterly. "That's the official term. The reality is that they couldn't figure out how to live with themselves in peacetime. One left a note saying that civilian life felt like being buried alive." They reached the rehabilitation center's crisis intervention ward, where Dr. Martinez was waiting with a team of specialists. His usually calm demeanor was cracked with exhaustion and frustration. "Sarah, thank you for coming," he said. "We have 18 enhanced veterans in various stages of psychological crisis. The standard therapeutic protocols aren't working. These individuals were conditioned for high stress, high-stakes decision-making, and civilian life simply isn't providing the neurochemical stimulation their enhanced brains require." Sarah looked through the observation windows at patients she recognized, former soldiers and officers, who had once commanded respect across the galaxy, now struggling with basic existence. Some sat motionless, staring at walls. Others paced restlessly, their enhanced minds spinning without purpose. "What do you want from me?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew. "You're the only enhanced veteran we've documented who seems to be successfully adapting to civilian life," Dr. Martinez said. "We need to understand what you're doing differently." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. 6 months ago, she had been contemplating her own integration failures. The idea that she was now considered a success story felt surreal. "I'm not sure I'm successfully adapting," she said honestly. "I'm just finding ways to make each day bearable." "That's more than most of them have managed," Marcus said quietly. "Will you talk to them?" The first veteran Sarah met with was Commander Lisa Park, who had coordinated supply lines across 3 star systems during the war. Lisa now spent her days in a state of near catatonic depression, unable to find meaning in any civilian activity. "They keep telling me to find hobbies," Lisa said, her voice flat and mechanical. "Hobbies. I used to ensure that 40,000 soldiers had food, ammunition, and medical supplies. Now I'm supposed to get excited about gardening or pottery classes." Sarah sat beside her, recognizing the particular emptiness in Lisa's eyes. "What if the problem isn't finding the right hobby? What if it's that we're trying to shrink ourselves to fit into a world we've outgrown?" "What do you mean?" "I spent months trying to become the person I was before the war," Sarah explained. "But that person doesn't exist anymore. The war changed us permanently. Maybe instead of trying to go backwards, we need to figure out how to go forward." Lisa looked at her with the first spark of interest Sarah had seen. "How do you go forward when everything feels meaningless?" Sarah thought about David's robot, Emma's trust, and all the small moments that had slowly rebuilt her sense of purpose. "You find new ways to use what you've become, not in service of war, but in service of something that matters to you." Over the next several days, Sarah worked with the rehabilitation team to develop what they eventually called purpose-based integration therapy. Instead of trying to help enhanced veterans adapt to normal civilian roles, they focused on finding ways for them to use their unique capabilities in service of causes they cared about. For Lisa, that meant coordinating relief efforts for disaster-affected areas, work that utilized her logistical expertise while serving humanitarian goals. For others, it meant teaching strategy and tactical thinking to emergency responders, helping design better systems for everything from hospital management to urban planning. The key insight was that enhanced veterans didn't need to become normal. They needed to find meaningful ways to be extraordinary, But even as Sarah helped develop these new protocols, she struggled with her own sense of identity. Being seen as the poster child for successful integration was a heavy burden, especially when she still felt like she was improvising her way through each day. The crisis came when she received another call, this time from Maria at the Children's Hospital. Emma Rodriguez had been readmitted with complications from her heart surgery, and she was asking for Sarah specifically. Sarah found Emma in the intensive care unit, connected to machines that monitored her fragile condition. The little girl's face lit up when she saw Sarah, but her voice was weak. "I knew you'd come," Emma whispered. "The nurses said you were away, but I told them you'd come back." "I promised I'd always be here for you," Sarah said, taking Emma's small hand in hers. "I keep my promises." Over the next week, as Emma's condition worsened, Sarah found herself torn between her obligations to the rehabilitation center and her desire to be with the child who had helped her remember how to care about individual human beings. Dr. Martinez was understanding but persistent. "The work you're doing here could help hundreds of enhanced veterans," he reminded her. "Your insights are saving lives." "And Emma is one life that I can actually touch," Sarah replied. "One person who doesn't care about my tactical brilliance or my strategic value. She just wants me to be present." The tension came to a head when Emma's parents asked Sarah to speak at what everyone expected would be the little girl's memorial service. At the same time, the Department of Enhanced Veteran Affairs was pressuring her to present her integration protocols to a galaxy-wide conference of military leaders. Standing beside Emma's bed, watching the child sleep peacefully despite her critical condition, Sarah realized that this moment crystallized everything she had been struggling with since returning to civilian life. She could choose to be Admiral Chen, whose insights might help thousands of enhanced veterans integrate into post-war society. Or she could choose to be simply Sarah, present for one sick child who had taught her how to love without calculating cost-benefit ratios. "Which would you choose?" she asked Marcus during one of their late-night conversations. "6 months ago, I would have said the conference," he admitted. "Maximum utilization of your capabilities, greatest good for the greatest number. But watching you work with these veterans, seeing how your approach is actually helping them, I think maybe the most strategic thing you can do is refuse to think strategically." "What do you mean?" "You help people because you care about them individually, not because they represent larger categories or strategic objectives. That's what makes your approach work. The moment you start thinking about helping Emma as a way to optimize your therapeutic technique, you become just another enhanced veteran trying to engineer solutions to human problems." Sarah looked through the window at Earth, hanging blue and peaceful in the lunar sky. Somewhere down there, Emma was fighting for her life while enhanced veterans struggled to find meaning in a world they had helped save. Both problems mattered, but only one of them required her specific presence. "I think I know what I have to choose," she said quietly. The decision would disappoint the rehabilitation center, frustrate the Department of Enhanced Veteran Affairs, and probably limit her ability to help enhanced veterans on a large scale. But it would keep her grounded in the small personal connections that had taught her how to be human again. Sometimes the most strategic decision was to stop thinking strategically. 5 years after the war ended, Sarah Chen stood in her small office at the New Denver Children's Hospital, looking at a wall covered with drawings from young patients. Crayon spaceships flew next to watercolor flowers, and stick figure families smiled under bright yellow suns. In the center hung a photo of Emma Rodriguez at her high school graduation, healthy and beaming, with Sarah beside her. Emma had survived her crisis, though the recovery had taken months. She was now 18, preparing for college and planning to study pediatric medicine, because someone showed me that the best way to use your abilities is to help people who need you, she had written in her graduation speech. Sarah's choice to stay with Emma during that critical period had cost her the conference opportunity and strained her relationship with the rehabilitation center, but it had also solidified something fundamental about who she wanted to be in the world. A knock on her door interrupted her reflections. Maria Santos entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression she reserved for important conversations. "We need to talk about the Peterson Foundation offer," Maria said, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk. The Peterson Foundation had been courting Sarah for months, offering her the position of director of their new Enhanced Human Integration Initiative. It was exactly the kind of work she had turned down 5 years ago, but with a crucial difference. This time, it would be based at the hospital, integrating therapeutic work with children into a broader program for enhanced veterans. I know you're hesitant, Maria continued, but this could be your chance to do both things: help individual children and develop programs that serve enhanced veterans on a larger scale. Sarah picked up one of Emma's drawings from her desk, a picture of a woman reading to a child, with "Thank you, Sarah" written in careful block letters at the bottom. What if I'm not good at managing large programs? What if I'm better at working with individuals than designing systems? What if you're selling yourself short? Maria countered. I've watched you work with our most difficult cases. You don't just help individual children. You understand their needs in ways that improve our entire approach to pediatric care. Your enhanced cognitive abilities aren't a burden you have to overcome. They're a gift you can use to help more people. Over the past 5 years, Sarah had indeed developed techniques that went far beyond traditional child therapy. Her enhanced pattern recognition helped her identify emotional needs that other counselors missed. Her strategic thinking skills translated into innovative approaches to helping children cope with long-term illness. Her ability to process complex information quickly meant she could coordinate care between multiple specialists in ways that dramatically improved outcomes. The foundation isn't
asking you to become Admiral Chen again, Maria said gently.
They're asking you to become the person you've already become, someone who uses extraordinary abilities in service of ordinary human compassion. That afternoon, Sarah walked through the hospital halls, observing the work that had become her life. In the pediatric ward, she stopped to help 12-year-old Alex Kim with a mathematics problem that was frustrating him during his extended stay. Her enhanced processing made the solution obvious, but she guided Alex through discovering the answer himself. You're really smart, Alex said when he finally solved the equation. Are you a teacher or something? Something like that, Sarah replied. I help people figure things out. In the rehabilitation wing, she visited with veteran Tom Bradley, a former enhanced soldier who had joined her informal support group 6 months ago. Tom was struggling with civilian employment, finding most jobs either too simple to hold his interest or too complex for employers to trust him with. I had another interview yesterday, Tom said. Tech company, strategic planning position. They were excited about my military background until they realized I was enhanced. Then they got nervous about whether I'd fit in with their corporate culture. Sarah nodded sympathetically. This was a common problem. Enhanced veterans were simultaneously overqualified and unemployable for many civilian positions. Have you considered the hospital's medical logistics coordinator position? They need someone who can handle complex scheduling and resource allocation. Working in a hospital? Tom looked skeptical. Working with people who care more about competence than conformity, Sarah corrected. Maria is building a team that includes 3 enhanced veterans. They're not hiding their abilities, they're using them to save lives. As the day ended, Sarah found herself in the hospital's memorial garden, a quiet space dedicated to patients who hadn't survived their treatments. She came here when she needed to think, surrounded by the names of children she had known and lost. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, who was now running a successful consulting firm that helped organizations integrate enhanced veterans into civilian roles. The foundation offer is a good one, he had written. You could help a lot of people. I already help a lot of people, she typed back. You help dozens. You could help thousands. Sarah stared at the message for a long time before responding. What if helping thousands makes it impossible to help dozens? But even as she wrote it, she wondered if that was really true. The foundation's offer would let her maintain her work at the hospital, while developing programs that could be implemented at medical centers across the galaxy. Enhanced veterans would have meaningful work options that utilize their abilities without requiring them to remain in military or quasi-military roles. That evening, Sarah called Dr. Martinez at the rehabilitation center. They had maintained a friendship despite her departure from the veterans programs, and she valued his perspective on enhanced psychology. The question isn't whether you can do the work, Dr. Martinez said after she explained the foundation offer. You've already proven you can. The question is whether you can do it without losing the thing that makes your approach special, which is, you see people as individuals, not as cases or categories. Most enhanced veterans struggle with integration Because well-meaning people try to optimize their lives instead of understanding their personal needs. You do the opposite. You understand each person's unique situation and help them find their own path forward. But can that approach scale up to organizational programs? Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Maybe the real question is whether organizations can scale down to individual approaches. Your work suggests that the most effective way to help enhanced veterans isn't through standardized protocols, but through personalized support that recognizes their individual humanity. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the hospital to find Emma Rodriguez waiting in her office. Now a college freshman, Emma visited whenever she was home on breaks, maintaining the connection that had been crucial to both their recoveries. "I heard about the foundation offer," Emma said without preamble. "Are you going to take it?" "I'm not sure yet. It would mean less time working directly with children like you." Emma smiled. "Children like me grow up, Sarah. But there will always be new children who need what you can give them. The question is whether you can help more of them by expanding your reach. When did you become so wise?" Sarah asked. "Someone taught me that the best way to honor the help you've received is to find ways to help others," Emma replied. "Sounds like something you might have said once." That afternoon, Sarah made her decision. She called the Peterson Foundation and accepted their offer, with conditions. She would maintain her direct patient work at the hospital. The enhanced veteran integration programs would be based on individual assessment, rather than standardized protocols. And the foundation would fund similar programs at children's hospitals across the galaxy, creating a network of facilities where enhanced veterans could find meaningful work helping young patients. 2 months later, Sarah stood before a conference of medical administrators and enhanced veteran advocates, presenting her integration model. But instead of speaking from a podium to a faceless audience, she had insisted on a more personal format. Enhanced veterans who had found success in hospital programs shared their stories directly, explaining how caring for sick children had helped them rediscover their humanity. The key insight, Sarah explained to the assembled delegates, is that enhanced veterans don't need to become normal. They need to find ways to be extraordinarily human. Working with children who are facing life-threatening illnesses teaches them that the most important enhancement isn't cognitive, it's emotional. The ability to be present for someone who needs you, without calculating strategic advantage or optimal outcomes. In the audience, she spotted Marcus, who had flown in to support her presentation. He was smiling with genuine pride, no longer the struggling veteran she had met in rehabilitation, but a successful professional who had found his own path to integration. After the conference, Sarah returned to her office at the hospital, where her wall of children's drawings had grown to include artwork from young patients at facilities across 3 star systems. Each picture represented a child whose life had been touched by an enhanced veteran, learning to be human again. Emma's graduation photo still held the place of honor in the center, but it was now surrounded by images of other success stories,